When I was 16, I was sexually assaulted. Sexual assault was not good, but it definitely wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the aftermath.
Did you come out of that feeling cared for, or more like fighting for like, I wasn't treated well and I have to change how this is done?
In the courtroom, you're called every name under the sun. It's what were you wearing? What did you say? What did you do? What did you drink? It was all what I done. 99% are taken by people you know. This whole white van kidnapping thing, that's just not what's happening, you know. It's happening through the process of grooming. And I'm working on a bill right now to make grooming illegal.
How do people get involved to support you in the work you're doing?
We have campaigns such as the Real Men Don't Groom campaign. There's a petition that you can sign to support the change in legislation.
All right, welcome to the Built for This podcast, Stories of a Maverick. We are here today with Alana Stott. She is an author, advocate, entrepreneur, and founder of the Blue Rose Foundation. Today, we're going to be kind of unpacking her story from adversity and how she turned it into purpose, and then from tackling human trafficking to advocating for mental health. Alana Stott is with Out Built for This. So welcome to the podcast. We're super excited to have you here today. And we want to start off by kind of getting to know a bit more about you and sort of your origin story. So talk to us a little bit about where you grew up and how you grew up.
Yeah, so I was born in Aberdeen in Scotland. So this is the oil and gas capital of Europe. So it is very much a rich-poor divide, and I definitely wouldn't go up on the rich side. So I grew up with a mom, dad, and an older brother. And then my mom and dad were divorced when I was around 7. That I guess after that my mom started dating again, and then I had a younger brother, and then I was badly burnt in an accident when I was about 8 years old, so I spent a lot of time in hospital from that point onwards. Then I guess my little brother came at the same sort of time as the burns happened. And I guess that was really life really changed around the divorce. That was a big kind of turning point for me, from this happy upbringing to everything was a little bit different now. Then I guess when I was about 11, that's when I started working. My mom, she was a single mom, she was doing her best, but we couldn't afford much. So I started working in a railway cafe and then progressed to a few other cafes and restaurants and various different places like that. When I was around about 13, my mom got quite sick, and then I had to take over a lot more of the financial commitments. So it wasn't just foods and extras anymore. It was bills to pay and other things that needed to be done. So I was working in telesales, I was working in and I was actually doing not bad at 13, to be honest. And then she unfortunately passed away quite soon after that. And then my younger brother, his father came back to get custody of him. So he obviously, well, I actually did fight. I tried to keep custody, but I couldn't at 15. Funny enough, the courts didn't go my way. And then he moved down to England, and that I had to follow. I'd only ever known him in my life, so I had to follow and move down to England to live with him. So I worked in hotels and various things then. So that brought me to that stage. And then really that was when things, I guess, took a bit of a turn for me. When I was 16, I was in much older groups of people. I was working in much older environments, and unfortunately, I was sexually assaulted by a couple of people while I was down there. And at that time, I took these people to court and went through the whole process of what it is to go through the court process. And that was when I really learned about what it was to be, I guess, a victim of sexual assault and how that's treated within the court system and how things change in your life then. So that brought me into, I guess, the advocacy of fighting for women from like 17. That was when you started down that path.
And how was your experience kind of going through that? I know kind of each sort of country a little bit different in terms of, I'll call it the care and delicacy that's required to handle those situations versus, for sure, in Canada, there is definitely a fear of I'm not going to be believed, or sometimes coming forward makes it that much worse than just like walking away like, yeah, it happened. I'm just going to move on. I'm not going to worry about who it was because nothing's going to happen. So kind of, did you come out of that feeling cared for, or more like fighting for like, I wasn't treated well and I have to change how this is done?
I mean, for me, the sexual assault was not good, but it definitely wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the aftermath and everything that I went through. I mean, if I walked you through the process, what had happened was I didn't know who had done it. I knew that two people had come into the room. There was a whole group of people downstairs. I was out for the count, so it was never quite proven if I was drunk or what happened, but I'd had like 2 drinks and completely passed out. So I didn't know who'd come into the room, and there was a lot of people there. I asked everybody. Everybody said no. I had a boyfriend at the time, and he said nobody was in the room, Alana. Nobody came near the room. And I was kind of freaking out because I knew something had happened. I just didn't know what. So really, when I spoke to a friend later that evening, she knew that I was not good. So she started asking everybody what happened. Then eventually the guy that I was dating said, well, it was me. Like, I don't know what she's freaking out about. And then she was like, well, you didn't tell her that. It got to the point that my friend said, well, let's go to the station. So we went to the police station. I explained what happened. I explained what very little I did know. They arrested all the guys who were there. And these two gentlemen said, one said, well, she's my girlfriend. The other said, well, it's his girlfriend. And he said it was okay. So that was their kind of defense in it. They said, yes, she was passed out, but she was my girlfriend and it's okay. And it's his girlfriend, so it's okay. So the police were like, great, you're arrested, you're charged. Like that was it. So that was how I kind of found out who was in the room. So everything else I had to say was just through really what they were confessing anyway. And then after that, 9 other girls came forward and said that they'd been through similar circumstances with these guys, and it just kind of spiraled. But then one by one, they would drop out because it was a small town and they were trying to intimidate us out of going. And that almost gave me a little bit of strength. I was like, well, I'm not backing down. And, bullies had never really sat very nicely with me anyway. But I guess back to when I was going through the actual exam, like the rape kit and everything else they have to do, it was, I guess, 6 o'clock in the morning by the time I got to the hospital part of it. And it was a male doctor, and he was not happy to have been woken up. And I quite distinctly remember that it was a white sheet on the ground. Stand on that sheet, take your clothes off on the bed, super humiliating and what you'd already been through that night. And
yeah,
it was a horrible experience. And I remember just almost like disassociating from everything that was going on for the next few months and everything that went on. And just as it went to the point that they were getting sent to prison, I was like, this is horrible. Like, girls have to go through this every day. In the courtroom, you're called every name under the sun. It's, what were you wearing? What did you say? What did you do? What did you drink? It was all what I done. Nothing.
Exactly. Yeah, you must have been asking for it in some way. Yeah.
So I really wanted to be involved in that some way of making some sort of change and making it, less. Of course, like, a crime has to be scrutinized, and we need to make sure that false accusations aren't made. But how you are made to feel, like the humiliation and the shame and everything else that comes with being a woman and being assaulted, was something I felt I needed to be involved in.
And kind of, I mean, unfortunately, it's kind of across females, it's not an uncommon story to just feel like, regardless of what's happened to you, that somehow you've brought this on yourself and how to unpack that. And definitely, I think, propelling the fear of women wanting to come out and, stand up for what's happened to them. But I also think more importantly, what, I start to see more now is men actually really calling out other men for poor behavior and, their friends, or when they're starting to cross the line, whether there's alcohol, drugs, or complete sober behavior happening, and kind of just either one, thinking it's funny and that their friends being somewhat comical or hilarious, and that's just how they are and that's okay, versus really stepping up and being like, that's not okay, and actually stepping in before it gets to that point. And I'm hopeful that that's starting to shift a little bit now in terms of the conversation and men really wanting to support women, because it takes both of us on both sides, not us versus them, to really make any kind of change. And so what was the kind of first step for you to get, like, organization wise or maybe even career wise, to get into that world from, I guess, a professional perspective?
Yeah, I mean, for me, so I was just saying before, I didn't have a mom, or I didn't have anybody that I could really turn to or lean on in that way. So I had to navigate through what had been, for the case, it was, shame, 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 shame. And that was kind of what was ingrained in me by the time I was 18, I guess. And I had to take that mindset and say, how do I then process this in my brain? And right or wrong, I went to help other people. Like rather than looking inward and helping myself, I said it's best if I go and help other people. And it worked. And I went and, I worked for the Rape Crisis Center. And that was probably one of the first things that I went, whoa, this is our support system. It was a tiny little room with, very, very cold, very dull, very horrible feeling place where women that had been raped were sent from the police station. They would come in, they would be in this horrible cold room. Somebody would interview them. And I quickly learned that I would be one of those people interviewing them. And I had zero training. I had zero anything. And I'm happy to speak to this person, but I don't really know what I'm saying. I really don't know what I'm doing or how I'm doing this. And I remember one of the first people that I sat in front of was a young girl who'd been sexually assaulted by her dad since she was a baby, pretty much. And she was now 24 and she was having to go to court. And they'd asked me to speak to this girl. And I was like, how am I speaking to this girl? How do I break down the psychological damage and everything that she's been through? And I said to them, like, why don't we have trained counselors here? Why isn't there people that can do this? And they said, well, funding, we don't have any. And that was when the kind of fundraising side of me came out and said, well, actually, what if I help with this? What if I can get more money? What if I can do more in that way of advocacy? So I had the direct contact with victims. I started fundraising. And then when I met my husband, that's when we really looked into, where we got deeper into the human trafficking side, into the grooming side, the sexual assault side, and said, okay, well, rescue is going to be a really important part of what we do. We're going to have to go to other countries. We're going to have to do a lot more there. So that kind of expanded there.
And I want to pause there because I want to let people know that your husband was in special forces. So no kind of surprise, I imagine, if I put myself in your footsteps, meeting somebody who has that duty of service and care, and also I think naturally has a bit of that protector quality, makes a ton of sense from a partnership perspective. But at kind of what point, I guess, because of being able to be having service, and my guess is probably he went away for either like weeks or months at a time. So how, I guess, kind of you're dealing on kind of the ground level where you're at, seeing all these kind of breaks in the system happen. He's going to places unknown and doing missions to do things. So how do you, I guess, kind of compartmentalize and sort of manage the stress, or what is it like to be in a partnership that kind of has that almost, I'll call like roller coaster or a bit of chaotic dynamic in sort of what you both really love to do?
So, I mean, I guess to go back, although some terrible things had happened to me, the one thing that I was very good at, and there was never really shame in admitting, was I had intellect. So even though I left school very young, I was always, I was never going to just settle as a waitress. I wanted to be the manager. I had to keep going up no matter where I was. So yeah, so finance was my big thing, and I loved finance. So I was in as a debt collector, and as a teenager, I became a debt collector, and I quickly learned that to get people, I couldn't be forceful when it came to debt collection. So to get people to pay, my mum was in debt all the time, and we had the guys knocking on the door all the time. I never wanted to scare people like that. So I would sit down and do the budget plan with them. Like, okay, why are you not paying your debt? Let's see if we can work this out. See if we can save money somewhere. How can we could we do a financial plan? So I would do all those things with them, and I became very, very good at it. I was number one in Scotland for a while at debt collecting. I didn't force anybody to pay. We just came up with a plan and fixed the problem. Then I started working in finance, and then eventually I became a bank manager. So I went very, very career focused. I was always still doing the advocacy side on the other side, but I bought properties. I was running 3 banks by the time I met Dean. Like we were doing all the stuff, and I'd never dated. Like I dated, but I'd never been in a relationship. I'd never been in love. I'd never done any of these things. I was very close. In fact, Dean would call me the ice queen when he I didn't want that, and nobody had fought.
Yeah, I had broken through the barrier of like building that trust of like, I see you, let me in. Yeah.
And Dean was the first one. Dean went, I'm not accepting that. I'm going to fight, and I'm going to break down those barriers, and I'm going to do these things. And he did, and he put a lot of effort in. until we actually went, okay, let's get together. And I really didn't know what the special forces were at the time. I knew we had an army, I knew we had these things, but I didn't know much about the military. And
Yeah.
then, so for him being away and things, it didn't. I already had my own life. I had my own setup. Everything was good, and I wasn't used to having love in my life anyway. So he was coming and going, and we made it work. Like he lived one end of the UK, I lived at the other. We would travel as much as we could. We phoned each other every night. We just really did make it work. And then when we knew that it was love, and we knew we were going to be, we knew very quickly we'd be together forever. So it was, we just work out a way to make this happen. But I think the only time that I really struggled was when we had our first child. I'd left all my work. I'd stopped working. I was supporting Dean's work and supporting his business for about 9 months. I'd done this, and I completely lost myself. I had no idea who I was anymore. I was just a mum to this beautiful little thing. And the thing with having a girl after you've been through sexual trauma and things is, most people say you get all this rush of love and everything else. Like mine was just protection. I was like, I have to protect this baby with
No doubt. Yeah.
So I've now got this baby. I've lost my identity, and that was probably the biggest struggle. I had to look within myself again and go, okay, no, you need to get work. You need to be doing what makes you Alana, while still looking after the baby and still being there. So the only way that I would say that Dean and I work is that we both got our own things that we have to do every day. Like there's no day that isn't busy. So if he has to go away for 2 weeks, if I have to go away, we know how to do it. And don't get me wrong, that wasn't easy. We went through a lot. I think the worst year he was home for 21 days in the year, and that was when we really had to sit down and be like, this is silly now.
Yeah. And how do you deal with the fear component? Because I mean, you mentioned, having a daughter, and then it switches into protection mode and like complete from all facets of I would never, want what I experienced to happen to her. But then also on the flip side, you have somebody whose passion or what kind of drives them is risking their life to complete a mission or save somebody. And I feel like if I had kind of found my person, and knowing that like I could lose them at any time because you support what they do, I would have a hard time with that.
So every single thing we do, every element of what we do, we're helping someone. There's something that we're doing that is helping a person, and it's usually a life or death situation. So there's normally something in that. Every job that we do that is in that area, the evacuations, the human trafficking, life or death, the kidnappings, all those types of things, we do it together. So it's planned, all logistics, all the timings, everything. There was a time a long time ago that Dean would bring on other partners, and every time it would go wrong. We've got to the stage now, it's only us. We do it together. We do all the planning. So I know where he's going, I know when he's going. We've planned it. I know it is as much as we can get it. Let's say safe as we can get it. It's not safe, but because we've done it together, it's as much on me as it is on him. And I'm able to just say, well, this is what he does. And if, God forbid, something happened to him, it would happen because he's doing something that he loves. Because the other option would be, okay, Dean, stop it. Get a 9 to 5. Just, work in an office, you're safe, like nothing's going to happen to you. But it would be soul destroying for Dean. Like he wouldn't be Dean. So I could do that, and he probably would do it if I asked him to, but I wouldn't want anyone to give up who they're meant to be.
And I want to preface too, so he, just because I've had a chance to, hear his story a little bit, and I look forward to kind of digging with him. So I know that, he didn't want to leave Special Forces. That wasn't his, ideal choice. He did get injured and then, had to make a decision. So from, I guess, in a partner and, not surprising that you'd be kind of pivotal and sort of had to take what he loved to do and sort of shift it in a way with what he could do going forward. But what was that kind of like for you as a partner to show up for somebody who just kind of had the rug pulled out underneath them in a way that, maybe they were not expecting to happen so soon versus later, in their career in that type of environment, and then being able to re-energize and revision a path forward that keeps them in your gift And their gift and your gift, really. What was that like, and sort of how did that come about?
It's interesting because I see it not just in spousal relationships, but friendships and any kind of relationship. There has to be a two-way support system goes on. Yes, there is often one person who's maybe the strength more often, but I do hear a lot about people, especially the givers in the world, who have friends that'll just even have an hour-long conversation and they won't ask once how the other person is, or these types of dynamics. Dean and I's dynamic worked because, when we first met and he broke down the ice queen, as he would say, and he was like, "Why are you working in a bank if that's not what you want to do?" I told him I wanted to be a spy. He got me the application form for MI6. Like he was very much like a driver. He was like, there's more to you than this. Let's go. And he was the first person that had ever come into my life with that. I've always been quite, nothing's impossible, but now I've got somebody alongside me who believes the same. So he really, that first while that we were together, he was the driver and everything that I was doing. Let's do it. Let's go. Let's go. Dean was in Oman and he jumped out of a plane and the parachute rope got caught on his leg and like ripped his leg. So he tore absolutely everything. And he's like, he survived, obviously, but as soon as he landed, he knew that his career was over. He knew that his leg was gone. He was in a hospital bed for 2 weeks because there was an Icelandic volcano had erupted, so they couldn't fly. There was no fly zone. So by the time he got back to me, it was about a month after the injury had actually happened. He'd probably lost like 30 pounds. He was white as a ghost. And I remember him coming off the train and with his crutches and everything. And I just saw it was a different person. And I immediately went, okay, he needs me. So it was like straight into it. I need to look after him now. I need to be the strong one. I could see that all this life had just drained out of him. And we moved, we packed up so we were closer to the hospital that he could be. And he was, remember one time he tried to run and he just fell over. He smashed an egg one day and just, it upset him so much. So I was like, I had to be that strength. Like, I was like, right, okay, this is what we're going to do. You're not able to work in the special forces anymore, but what do you want to do? You want to do a security job? Okay, let's do that. How do we get into that? You can't walk. Okay, let's slowly get back into that. Everything had to be, I had to be the strong one. He was kind of brave, and that pulled him up. And then that took a while, and there was a lot went on, and there was a lot of things go on. But there's been times that since that I've gone down, he said, "Pull me up." We have to do it together, and we have to be each other's energies when it's lacking on the other side.
Yeah, and I love because when you like joke of the meeting in Ice Queen as somebody who kind of has always been a strong and tough one, and like I'm fine, I got this. So when somebody gets you to kind of be in that soft space and sort of matches sort of your heart and really where you want to go is such a special thing. And then I think to be able to go through so much adversity together and come out stronger versus it dividing and separating, but rather coming together and conquering. So when was I guess coming out of special forces, you're going to have, connections and to kind of get into private security is a natural segue and being able to do that. But how did you kind of start to decide, like, let's build this business and kind of learn all, if the finance stuff doesn't surprise me, like, yeah, I know how to kind of cost this out, build a spreadsheet, we'll figure it out. But I imagine kind of understanding the lingo, like what actually happens on these missions is a whole other education to be able to really step in. So how did that kind of build?
Well, first of all, there's one thing that I do about life, the way I tackle it. As I said, my mom was very, very young when she died. So life to me is very, very short. And there isn't enough time for fear or embarrassment. I wanted to be in the security world with my husband. We decided to do that because the original deciding plan was because a friend of mine was rescuing some kids out of Haiti that were being trafficked, and she couldn't get security to go with her for less than however much that company were charging. And I said, well, I'd have to be able to help her next time. So Dean got in touch with a guy who was a former SES, trained the Mujahideen back in the 70s. And he said, can we get Alana on the force as well? So I ended up on a 4-week residential course training with this guy every day on how to be a close protection officer. And then we trained on that. We set up the company. The idea was fully about getting it ready so that we could pro bono any human trafficking cases or any child rescue cases that came in. And literally at that point, Arab Spring happened. So Arab Spring was the uprising in Northern Africa. So straight away, Dean was out to Libya. Dean was out to, like, this was where he was pretty much spending most of his time. And I was having to learn very, very quickly, like, what this was all about, what security was all about, what the lingo is, how everybody talks. But I just ask questions about everything. I have got zero issue with not knowing what I don't know. Like, I'll ask and learn, and I don't mind making myself look stupid. I don't mind, right now I'm writing a bill around human trafficking about making grooming illegal, and I'm learning all this legal stuff that I know nothing about, but I'm asking questions every day and probably making a fool of myself every day, but really it's the only way to grow and learn. So I learned about the security industry. I read, I studied, I done as much as I could. Dean knew a lot about it, but if left to most of these guys' devices, the work might get done, but no invoice would ever get sent or no accounts would ever get done or
Yeah, drop us out of a plane, we're good. But like, sorry, where's the spreadsheet and how do you pay for this? I don't know.
I don't know. And they don't know. They don't, all they've ever known is it's there. If they need a tank, it's there. If they need ammo, it's there. Like, they don't know how to finance. They don't know how to budget. They don't know how to, nothing. So somebody has to do all that. And it's very funny when people used to be like, Dean, Dean, Dean. And sometimes, even if I had to do something and I would send an email from Alana Stott, zero reply, nothing. So then I would send it from Dean Stott, straight away I would get a reply. So I had to deal with that and navigate that world too.
Yeah, I connect strongly to that as somebody who's worked with a lot of male entrepreneurs and is kind of that like number two seed of where, and I still meet people to this day like, oh yeah, I remember like meeting so and so, and I'm like, yeah, that was me the whole time, organizing, sending those emails. And then also in terms of a learning perspective, like I don't have an Ivy League background. I didn't do these massive degrees in education. So much like you, I was walking to a room and I just ask questions and I don't have an ego about it. I'm like, okay, if it's dumb, that's cool. We move forward, but I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to learn. I'm going to come back with a better question. And I'm just going to figure out how we make this happen because I'm super committed to pulling those people in or learning from people way smarter than me. Like, great, come on in.
Well, true. Like, you want to be in a room, you want to be the stupidest person in the room every time. Like, that's the only way, going in there with your ego and your bravado and everything, you're not actually growing. You're not doing anything. Like, we need to learn from people. And, like, I always use an example when the 2008 crash happened and everybody was losing everything and stocks were going and bonds were going and everything was gone. The one thing that I struggled with was car repossession. So if people hadn't paid their car loans, we had to repossess cars. But it was really difficult to do. It was a process, and I didn't know about the process. And I would put it off. So people would be out driving cars for free because I was putting off this process. And then one day I just took it home and I just learned. Like, I just really, really learned the process of repossession. And the amount it changed, like, I was able to do my job properly. I was able to be more effective because it wasn't fair on them. They were getting into more and more debt because I wasn't processing things properly. And once I'd learned, and I was like, why was I so hesitant on learning that? Like, it's made my life so much easier. It's better for these guys. Like, just, I guess when we think we know everything, we're not going to improve. We're not going to grow. It's not helping anybody else. So I think just take that little bit of ego and that little bit of pride and put it aside because it won't help.
No, I completely agree. And so now you've got to a point together where you're like, okay, we're doing missions. We're going to go and help in. And I know you mentioned kind of, all I really know about private security firms is I know that they can charge a lot of money, make a lot of money. And, families of affluence will have access if certain things happen based on where they're kind of coming from. But when you're talking about these rescue missions and trafficking, and obviously I know there's going to be some, probably, I would assume, government funding of some nature to come in and kind of help these situations. But if not, like, how do you, I know they're not cheap regardless of if you can kind of negotiate down to what we'll call like cost pricing, but what are the I guess the amounts you have to go after to figure out how to fund to do these type of things?
Yeah, it's so funny. I know so many people in the security industry that have managed to make their millions and they're living very well. We're not there because pretty much everything we end up doing on some sort of pro bono way, some shape or form. Because our life is about helping other people. Our life isn't to get rich and live in like, it is really like our purpose and our drive is helping people. So we find funding, things like when we went to Israel, October 7th happened, and Dean was away the next day. He was in Israel, and there was just so much disarray, and we had to just get people out. We put a call out to our network and said, look, we're heading here. We need to help people. Some of it will be flights, some of it will be transport, some of it will just be logistics. Like we need to get, and like immediately people helped. There wasn't even hesitation. I had people offering planes. I had people. We've got a really, really good network of people around us that we don't ask very often, but when they do, they always come through. The other option could be like things like with Afghanistan, we had clients who were there who did pay. So things like Thomson Reuters and USA and things, they would pay. And then we would have the ones that couldn't afford to pay or that couldn't. And then so we would offset that on that side of it. So most of the rescue missions, there's definitely no profit in it. It gets offset one way or another. I mean, but security in itself, yeah, it can be lucrative and it can be incredibly abused. A lot of the work that we do is to go and assess how people's security is being run. And we've gone into organizations where they're maybe paying for like 8, 9, 10 guards. You probably only need 1 or 2 and just a better assessment. We had one guy who was about to sign a $750,000 contract to secure his property because a homeless man kept getting onto his estate, and his daughters had seen this guy looking through the windows and like they completely panicked. A security provider came in and gave them a quote, and the quote was like 750,000 to provide security for his property, and he was ready. He was like, "Of course, you'll protect your daughter. You're going to do that." And then Dean went, and he said, "This is the estate. This gate. Do you ever shut it?" And he was like, "No, we pretty much keep it open all the time." And Dean was like, "Okay, shut your gate." The guy.
Step one, yeah.
And it was really that simple. The gate was pretty secure. It covered the whole grounds. Like, just shut the gate. And that was it. The job was done. But this other company was like, no, let's see if we can milk these people, and they're rich. Let's get what we can. We've just never done that. We're very much about the morals and the ethics of life, really.
Which is always good to hear, because I feel sometimes a lot of the bad actors get highlighted, or the ones who are making the most money have kind of that, we'll call it the more hype or PR behind them, especially if there's celebrities involved, or again, different things of kind of how that sort of world works. And so as you started to kind of, gain traction on this is sort of going to be a core business component for both of you, when did the foundation come into play of getting started and kind of expanding on that?
It's actually a really good segue into the question you've just asked, because that was one of the reasons. So part of my work, obviously I'm doing the logistics, the behind the scenes work and security, but my, I guess, specialty is OSINT, so the open source intelligence side of it. I do a lot of background checks, I do a lot of vulnerability assessments, these types of things. And in the philanthropic work, in my fundraising consultancy work, so I would work for other nonprofits and help them either make more money or look at what they're doing. I also worked with donors who wanted to make sure that they were donating to the right place, so I would check out nonprofits and make sure that they were right. Through learning and working with human trafficking, there was, I guess, 2016, 17, 18, UK and US governments started to take a lot more notice of human trafficking. And when somebody starts taking a lot more notice of something, funding starts to happen. So one of the things I was doing was checking out other profits, making sure they were okay. But from 2016, 17, 18, all this funding became available for trafficking organizations. Whenever a government says that they're going to take notice of something, funding starts to happen. Immediately there'll be a whole lot of new trafficking or whatever that subject is, nonprofits pop up. So I wanted to do is work with the very good people, but I assessed the good, the bad, and the ugly. So it's like, who's doing well, who's not doing well, who's maybe doing things really badly. So assessment was part of what I was doing. So I knew who was in the right place, like who's doing the right education and prevention, who's doing the right task force, who's doing the right safe houses. We would look at them all, and then I knew exactly who was doing the wrong thing. And one of the things that would really drive me crazy was there was a lot of people out there who paid a lot of money to do social media and marketing and make themselves look amazing, and they were really doing a lot of damage in the field. And then you would have this person who's doing amazing work, like incredible things, and they just didn't have that social media, and they didn't have that presence, so they weren't getting hardly anything in there. So I said, well, I'm going to set up the Blue Rose Foundation, and I'm going to use it as almost like, first of all, it's a platform for protecting people that are being trafficked and working with people, but it's also about protecting the good people that are doing the good work, and then being able to allocate the donors to the right places and to guide people. So, because, and this might sound a bit egotistical, and I don't mean it to be, but I am known for this area, and people will come and say, is this the right person to work with, is this not? And my word kind of counts in that way. So
Yeah, you have that credibility and
yeah,
people trust you, which is an amazing thing to have.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I wanted to put that platform together. And if, for example, a donor said, well, Alana, could I just give you the money and then you allocate it to the right place? Then I thought, okay, that's why I need the foundation. And then I set it up for that reason. And then I thought, okay, I can use this for pushing legislation. I can use it for helping, even with like films. We're working on some movies to get awareness, like, because my goal is to, if we took 100% of trafficking victims, 99% are taken by people they know, or from, this whole white van kidnapping thing. That's not what's happening. It's happening through the process of grooming, and the grooming process is legal in most countries. Until anything is sexualized, it's legal. But the grooming is where we really get the victims. It's where we find the victims, we secure their trust, we make them need us. It's a process. It's a very methodical.
Yeah, it's like that subtle influence over time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we can identify this and make it illegal, then we can stop these kids being hurt in the first place. And that's my dream. I don't want to be rescuing kids. I don't want to be rehabilitating kids. I just wanted to stop happening to them in the first place. So that's really where my focus is. And I'm working on a bill right now, which is to make grooming illegal. And that's it's going to be a bit of a fight, but we're going to hopefully get there. Because there is even film. We're working on a film that actually tells this story. I don't know if you've seen Adolescent on
It's so funny. I just saw your LinkedIn post, and I actually just finished watching it last night, and I was like, this was kind of darker than I was wanting on a weeknight, but I was like, it was fascinating in terms of the different components and how they highlighted each kind of influence, knowing, unknowing, kind of looking back in it, and kind of to no really resolve of like, how did we not know?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's so incredibly well made because that's what they're doing. The kids are sitting in bedrooms. We have people like Andrew Tate influencing boys to how to treat women, how to get women, like how to basically teaching them the whole process of grooming. Like everything about Tate's program is grooming. And he's teaching boys how to do this. So that's his first victims, really. These boys are being groomed into this horrendous mindset. And we're seeing things like the rise of ED medication for 14-year-old boys. And, because the abuse of porn and all these other things. And then there's all these girls that are going into webcams and OnlyFans because they're being convinced that this is what they should be doing. While some, I won't even say the bad word, but piece of is making
it's okay. We allow swear words on this podcast if they fit, right? I'm like, I'm here for it if it's,
Well, yeah, a piece of shit basically is making a lot of money off of the abuse of both boys and girls here, and it actually infuriates me so much. So I was so glad that Stephen Graham made this because it was so intellectually well done. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't over the top, it wasn't white van kidnappings and stuff. It was actually really what's going on in our kids' bedrooms every day. And it's happening all the time. You could go on to Tate's war room at any point and there'll be 60,000 boys on there looking at what he's doing and listening to what he's doing. And that effect, and that, in the mind as well, like to not understand what real love is, what real, what a real relationship should really look like. Could you imagine the knock-on effect that's going to have for generations if it isn't stopped?
And I think that's the scariest thing, as I always watch what's going on, or like my friends that I get to be, auntie to, and like little girls and boys. And, I experienced a lot of things growing up as a teenager, from like bullying, and then adulthood definitely was in an emotionally abusive relationship. But growing up and having social media access and everything is instant, and the portals, and from, your self-worth to how you should look and what's the definition of beauty. And then to your point, like what is sex, what is connection, and being shown things that are totally absurd and not natural, not how people meet or how things really go down. And then just propelling this to, there is dynamics. And, I've had a couple of people ask, like, as a woman, how do you feel walking out in the world with men around. I'm like, not great. Like, I don't feel safe, but I feel unsafe for a bunch of reasons. And, to live and breathe in that world as you kind of do every day, and even in a much deeper level, than I just touched on, like, how do you I worked in not this the same. I worked in a bit of like dog rescues, and I started to see when dogs were rescued before they were presentable to be adopted. And I found out what happened, the status. I viscerally couldn't control my rage of like how somebody could do that to an innocent animal, let alone if I lived and breathed that every day. So how do you balance the darkness with light?
I think I'm really, really blessed. Like, 'cause, Dean has a number of passions, but his passion is just to help people. And the number one person he likes to help is me. So whatever he sees that I'm passionate about, he'll get involved. And he doesn't like vulnerable people being hurt. If he sees an old person, or if he sees a child, or if he sees an animal being hurt, that'll set him off. So he's very, very supportive in what I do, and I can talk to him a lot. I also do a lot of self work now. I do a lot of meditation and breath work, plant medicine. I do a lot of different areas to really help and get rid of some of that awful toxins that we take in all the time. A lot of stage gets burnt around the room with some of the things that
I was gonna ask, is there like a kind of go-to self-care routine? Because even at this point, like, I mean, day to day, I think there's just a lot going on for people in their lives, and especially, you add in political climates, where you live, financial stressors, like you've experienced growing up, family dynamics, like all that stuff is just a lot for people. And I think, big events or rescues, or even the like mass shootings and stuff, and them just coming down to, isolation and people feeling disconnected and lonely. Like, it's a scary time. And so I think people being able to sort of release some of that and not become jaded or bitter, or be able to kind of want to connect deeper into the work is massive. Is there something, maybe a channel or like mode that came to you by surprise that really sort of changed the way you were able to sort of show up and consistently like exist in the space that you do?
Yeah, you'll probably be the first person I've ever really spoken to about it. But I worked for a nonprofit. I do fundraising consultancy as well. So I'd worked for a nonprofit last year called Heroic Hearts. Heroic Hearts take veterans on psychedelic therapy treatment. And the results are pretty incredible on working with PTSD and depression and suicidal thoughts. We were seeing some unbelievable things. So I helped them raise some money, and Dean will probably talk to you a bit more about his own experiences. But there is a wonderful group of them who help veteran spouses as well. They recognize that the effect on veteran spouses and secondary PTS and all the other things there. So I got invited to participate in a retreat. All these retreats are in places where it's legal and places, so it's all completely done in that way. And I went on the retreat a couple of years back, and it was life-changing for me. I released so much pain. All the things that I'd gone through, I felt them leave my body. Like, I felt so much. It changed my life. There's no other way to describe how much it benefited me. And then it just got me learning a lot more about what plant medicine is, what herbal medicine is, and not just, things like ayahuasca, or ibogaine, or psilocybin. I mean, like, just the herbs that we've got available to us now. The way that pharmaceuticals are pushed on people is pretty scary, but we don't really talk about the plants in our life that can help. So working with a lot more of that type of thing. And I can always tell if my mental health starts to slip, or I was working with one case recently where some of the things I was reading, and I've read a lot over 24 years, but this really got me. It really stuck with me. What I read had happened to this little girl, and it just wouldn't leave my head. So I knew I had to do a bit of work to get this out. So I know when it's coming. I know helping you build your self-worth, helping you release shame. There's a lot that the plant medicine space can do if done with the right people in the right settings, and the properly trained.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of plant medicine. I've had my own journeys, and I think it's just so fascinating. And I think there's just no other modality that I'm aware of that can kind of almost bring you outside of yourself to almost see things and from a totally different lens and move through things and feel things and release things, especially if people are suffering with like even chronic pain and illnesses of like your body will always give you like, I always say that your body always gives you little knocks like, are you listening to me? Until you get a really big kick. And it'll either be like, you've been diagnosed with this or you're flat out. And it's like, well, I told you you weren't listening. So here you go.
Like I was talking to a friend the other day. We talk a lot about the mental health and about how their mental health affects, but we haven't really dug deep into how much your physical body is affected by your mental health. And one of the biggest things for me, and I mean I wrote about it in my book, but I had an eating disorder which again aligns with sexual trauma so well. For most of my life, I started taking laxatives when I was 8 years old, and I was consumed by an eating disorder forever. The medicine showed me why it was and showed me what it was about. And because I'd taken laxatives for so long, I was addicted to them in the way that if I didn't take them, I wouldn't go. It would be weeks, and I would have to eventually. I've been hospitalized. Like I've tried to come off them, but it just wasn't working because my body just wasn't functioning. During one of our journeys, I felt my body completely open up and like all this trauma that was literally in my gut and in my stomach released out of my body and just washed away from me. And from that day, I haven't touched the laxatives, not one. My body was just released. I was TMI, but naturally went in the bathroom every day. Like everything was just functioning, and that I'd been to doctors, I'd been to so many different things to try and help with this, but to realize it was actually, your gut and your brain and the trauma is just holding on to everything there. So all these illnesses that are forming and cancers and pains and joint pains and all these different things, it's not, I mean, there probably is, you know, sprains and stuff you can get, but I think so much of it comes from the trauma that you go through that's never healed.
Yeah, it's so wild. And it's funny how much people want to resist that as being the option for a lot of like times. Or if I've had conversations with entrepreneurs like, Jenna, that's a little like foo-foo. And I'm like, okay, maybe it used to be, but now at least like there's so much science coming out. If you really want to go like, okay, I need a very well like renowned, expected like scientific journal article about it. Okay, great. So we have those in MDMA, psilocybin, now ketamine. Like
Yeah.
there's just different ways. And I think we're just all looking for, again, as you touched on, like pharmaceuticals. And I know, especially with veterans, and then when they get any support, like some of the documentaries I've seen, the amount of sheer chemicals they're prescribed to deal with. I'm like, it's not like, sure, painkillers if they've broken arms, like that stuff, whatever. But like what's going on for them is not like take a pill and fix this. This is like deep emotional and physical trauma that you have to work through so gently and with like such care, and not get them addicted to things, but also let them process in a way that allows them to heal and come back to themselves. And that's not done without plants. Like,
It's just as hard. There's like, I mean, you're taking all this trauma, you're taking all this pain, you're like squishing it in, and then putting this poison on top of it, and then locking it up, and then we'll just keep hold of that, and then we shake it now and then we're confused about why the suicides are rising and all these things are happening.
let's just keep you numb. And so you don't feel anything until eventually you just explode. Yeah.
The circle of it, the families, the wives, the kids, everybody else that has to deal with all that stuff. Like it's just hitting them too. But yeah, it's kind of wild to me that we do give so much pharmaceuticals, but and as you say, there's a lot of people that will push against when you are speaking about plant medicine. I just try to speak of it from my perspective, and I know that it's physically healed my body. It has been the best experience for my mind. It's given me so much self-love that I didn't have before. Like even when I was doing the best that I was doing, or I thought I was doing the best that I was doing, I didn't love myself. So that was here. It was really struggling, and the medicine really gave me that love. So I feel like it's when somebody says to me it's a bit woo woo or whatever. The other great thing is we're getting a lot more SEALs, Delta Force, Special Forces guys going through the treatment and seeing how it's benefiting them. And they're coming at, I know so many SEALs that are meditating daily, doing breath work daily, doing their treatments, doing all these things. And they're able to say, actually, look, like we're the toughest guy in the world and we're doing this, we're working on ourselves, we're learning how to love ourselves, we're learning how to do it. I think that if we had a world where everybody took that medicine, there'd be no wars, there'd be no hate, there'd be none of this greed and power, and all the things that are happening in the world could so be cured.
And everybody would be operating from like a regulated nervous system so you can have conversations. It doesn't have to be a fight. We can disagree, but we can talk and we can seek to understand and get curious. Like, what a wild idea. Like,
The governments and everybody else that need that power and that control have created that, and we don't seem to understand that. When I was a little girl, I loved debate. We had a debate club in our school, actually, and we used to love, like, here's the thing. What do you think? What do you think? Let's talk about it. Let's come to an understanding. Maybe I'll change my mind. Maybe you'll change yours. And then we'll go for a cup of coffee afterwards. Like, why do we have to hate each other because we've got different views? Why can't we listen? Why can't we talk, understand? It's all like it's my way or the highway. Everybody's always right now. Everybody believes that they're right, and their opinion is the only one that counts.
I know. And it's so interesting. Usually, too, when it's like divisive, it's like, well, what experience got you to believe that? And then sometimes you're like, oh, if I had that happen to me, I would believe the same thing. But like, here's something else. And I mean, I'm hopeful that things are starting to move a little foot forward by a little foot forward and having a domino effect. And, the work that you're doing and other groups coming together and being able to kind of pull more people into that possibility or way of being, even if it is, dragging one friend at a time to a yoga class that has a closing meditation to just give them that like little taste of like what that's like, and that their nervous system doesn't have to be in constant fight or flight mode.
Yeah.
And to recognize those differences, I think would be so impactful. But so as you kind of have had all these pieces come together and now, you have the foundation. What is kind of the future? What do you want it to look like? What is the big kind of goal for what your work is now?
If we could work on the Grooming Act, the ideal would be that grooming becomes a crime. That's definitely one of my big fights this year.
And is that US focused, UK focused, or where is that bill
It's
kind of?
US focused, yes. So the idea is to make it a federal crime, which at the moment we've got some statute in Texas and Minnesota. There are two places that have got a bit of crime related legislation for grooming, but the other 48 states have got nothing. So that would be the first thing. We are also working on a police training program because human trafficking has evolved, and it evolves every day. Every day, like something new's coming out. We're now heavy into the digital world, so much trafficking is done online. A lot of the grooming, most of the grooming is done online. We've come a long way from red light districts and whatnot. So, but the training hasn't come up. How we find the information hasn't caught up. The evidence gathering hasn't caught up. So I'm building out a police training program at the minute. I'd eventually like to grow that into training for everyone: EMS, judicial system, kids, parents, whoever it might be. And I guess the dream would be to eventually get a degree in human trafficking. I think it's big enough that there should be some sort of certification that you can get that would be degree related, because yourself, everybody wants a degree now. But it is a subject that most people are kind of aware of now, but they're not aware. They kind of, it's still, you watch a movie like Sound of Freedom and be like, oh, trafficking has been somebody's kidnapped, or trafficking has been that. But they're not aware of what really is trafficking. I mean, shows like Adolescence are great because it gives us a little bit more like, whoa, is that happening? And it's like, yeah, it is happening. We've got, one in every 150 people in the world is enslaved. We've got $250 billion industry with 55 million people trapped in slavery. Like it is happening on your doorstep. So we want to stop that. And I'd like to take a holiday. That's the other thing.
Yes, that's fair. Well deserved. If someone is listening right now and this is speaking to their heart, their core purpose, how do people get involved to support you in the work you're doing?
Okay, so Blue Rose Foundation, you can check that out. It's just bluerose.foundation, or alanastott.com. It has all my information on it. You can get involved as an advocate. We have campaigns such as the Real Men Don't Groom campaign, which is bringing real men to post to say real men don't groom. There's a petition that you can sign to support the change in legislation. That's on most of my social, everything's Alana Stott, LinkedIn, Instagram, etc. You'll find the petition there. And reach out if there's any way you want to help. I'm happy to take emails.
And we'll link all that in on the socials and this podcast episode so everybody can click it really easily. And so to kind of, we'll call this wrap it up and come to a close, I have kind of more quick fire questions for you that are always kind of fun and interesting to kind of close it out and learn a little bit more about you. What's the one truth that you hold that others might find unconventional?
Anybody can be absolutely anything they want to be. Nothing's impossible.
Love it. What's the best advice you've ever received?
That not everyone's the same. We have to not stop thinking that everybody's motivated by the same things, that everybody wants the same thing, everyone believes the same thing, everybody's willing to work the same pace. And that was a great boss of mine once told me that not everyone's the same, Alana.
For sure. And who's someone that reminds you that you're never alone in this work?
My daughter, Molly, for sure. She's my little partner in crime when it comes to what I do.
Awesome. And what is the thing that is lighting you up the most right now?
Writing. Actually, writing. I'm actually doing a lot more. Writing's my passion, but I just never get time for it. And I've been actually actively taking time now to sit down and write every day. And it's actually given me some good pheromones. So.
I love that. And lastly, what does Built for This mean to you?
Built for This mean to you? I think that if you're on the right path and you're doing what you're meant to be doing, if you're living within your purpose truly, it means that every single day that you're getting up, if you're doing what you're doing, then you'll know that you're built for this. Like if you're a personal trainer and you're getting to the gym and you're training people every day, then that's what you're built for. If you're jumping out of airplanes, I was thinking of Nancy there, like that's what she's built for. I think that is when you said it, it made me think of there's so many people in the world that are just not living what they're meant to be doing. Like they're too scared, or they're in their comfort zone, or they're whatever. You know, I say it. You're kind of living in your excuse era. Get out of that, because if you're built for something and you're not living in that, you're doing a huge injustice to the life that you could have.
I love it. That's amazing. I appreciate you being so honest and sharing kind of your evolution and your self-care and the journeys that have taken you to where you're at today and the amazing work you're doing. And we will keep you posted on all things coming in for Built for This. But thank you so much, Alana.
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely talking to you.
Awesome.